I have some great HOA stories for you today, and you're going to love that title story too. Here's our first one. Karen neighbor keeps calling the police and fire department over fire pit smoke nuisance, posted by Athena Doss M. We have lived in our Texas home since 2016, and we own it. It's always been our understanding that recreational outdoor burning is allowed within our city. I checked the city code and there is no HOA, and we have had a fire pit in the same location since shortly after we moved. Our outdoor fire pit sits next to our pool and meets city code requirements, like we have a certificate from the fire department, for instance, and it's located approximately 25 to 30 feet from my next door neighbor's windows. Ever since we moved to our home, we have attempted to maintain a good relationship with all our neighbors and believe that we have gone above and beyond in trying to be friendly with our next door neighbors. Enter Karen, which we used to have over for drinks by the fire, game night, and so on, maybe every other month for about the first 5 years. However, the police and fire department has been dispatched to our home 3 times within the past 5 weeks at the request of Karen. Even my 4 kids had to experience this because of what they are calling a smoke nuisance complaint inside her house. She says the inside of her house has a strong smell of smoke, that she can't sleep because of it, although we know she's a night owl. And she even claimed once that her kid had a cough the next day. But they run an illegal dog adoption agency out of her house, and there are normally 8 to 15 dogs in her house, making me think it could all be just a pet dandruff. Either way, each time the police and fire department came, we were asked to shut it down, and we complied. I tried reasoning with Karen and offered to plant a second tree barrier when we already have pear trees that block her house but go bare in the winter, but she declined. Her only solution is for us to move the pit. After the 3rd time this happened, I went down to the police and fire department to request in writing that they stop taking her work as factual and truly investigate inside her home regarding this smoke nuisance. Lo and behold, the 4th time she called the PD, the police officer dispatched went inside her house, and he stated there wasn't even a faint smell of smoke inside of her house, so he indicated there was no nuisance. To be clear, nothing has changed with the fire pit. What has changed is the fact that we no longer pet sit for them multiple times a year or invite them over for drinks by the fire, same which they used to enjoy and had no smoke nuisance complaint about, due to their constant attempt to control what we do with our fence upgrades, pool upgrades, and exterior paint, and in our house, their needy friendship, and the incessant special request. I have text with proof for all of these. It is our true belief that the main reason they are now complaining of smoke nuisance is the fact that we still invite 1 or 2 other neighboring couples to come to drink by the fire at our house about once or twice a month, and they are not being included. Otherwise, we cannot explain why Karen, during the course of 2016 through 2021, never complained about the smoke until after they stopped being invited. We are not the only neighbors that Karen has called the city on. There is an ongoing history of them not getting along with their neighbors, and it seems like their go-to plan of action mostly consists of placing complaints with the city to make their surrounding neighbors comply with their stupid request, and other neighbors can corroborate. With this said, we find their use of emergency calls to 911, false reporting on our legal fire pit, misuse of city resources, and believe they are using the police and the fire department as a form of harassment against us to scare and annoy us for no valid reason. We Googled the Texas Supreme Court findings on what constitutes a nuisance, and it says, a condition that substantially interferes with the use and enjoyment of land by causing unreasonable discomfort or annoyance to persons of ordinary sensibilities attempting to use and enjoy it. And keep in mind, Karen is claiming that our smoke is a nuisance inside their home, not outside. I know that she will continue calling the PD and fire department on us from here on out, and we would like a second opinion on placing a harassment complaint or how we can make her stop calling the PD and fire department each time we have a fire. An update in the comments, one person suggests if the smoke bothers her and causes her unreasonable discomfort or annoyance, you can't stop her from reporting it. That isn't harassment. OP says, it is when she keeps calling the PD and fire department on us because she is no longer being invited without a real reason. The proof is in the last police officer not being able to smell any smoke inside her house. For it to be a nuisance, doesn't she have to prove it substantially interferes and creates unreasonable discomfort? The police officer had an ordinary sense of smell and could not detect any smoke smell inside her house. Now, this was the first time that they went in to investigate if her claim was factual. I thought it was insufficient for her to claim private nuisance without her proving how it's impacting her. My 25-year-old female boyfriend, 28 male, and I want to avoid our relationship with our begging neighbor, 50-year-old female, who is our HOA president. Posted by Naughty Messy. I, 25-year-old female, live in a condo, which is bought and not rented, building with my boyfriend, who's 28. We've known our neighbor, Elle, who's in her 50s, pretty much since we moved in nearly 2 years ago. Elle lives alone in a very small condo which is located at the entrance of our building. It has a window which overlooks the entryway. She's always been a bit nosy with ours and other neighbors' business. When we first met, Elle was nice enough and seemed very concerned about the building administration and my country's version of an HOA, or whatever the equivalent is for condos. At the time, my boyfriend and I made friends with Elle because we needed her and other neighbors' support to vote out the previous HOA board who weren't managing anything and spent our money without justification. We had a few meetings inside our condo with Elle and other neighbors to organize. Eventually, Elle ended up being selected HOA president via random draw. She is a decent building administrator who has help from another neighbor who was selected as treasurer. Since then, however, Elle's nosy and overbearing tendencies have come to light. She would frequently stop by my boyfriend or I at the building entrance or in her condo and keep us tied up in conversation, mostly her monologue about some health or personal problem of hers, and sometimes for hours. It got to the point where my boyfriend and I were tiptoeing when entering the building in the evening so as to not be waylaid. At one point, starting a few months ago, Elle mentioned during a monologue that she was having health problems and financial issues. Elle began offering homemade cakes and sweets for sale to the neighbors and us to try to raise money. My boyfriend, who felt bad for Elle, kept buying regularly, to the point where we had cake slices several times a week for a few weeks on end. Because Elle has our phone numbers from the group chat for the condo, she would call or message my boyfriend or I several times a day on the days that she brought cake to sell in order to get us to buy from her. If we didn't answer right away, she would come and ring our doorbell several times, very loudly, until she either gave up or my boyfriend and I gave in. This has even happened as late as 10 p.m. I work from home and I finally got so fed up with all the calls and messages that I blocked Elle from messaging or calling me. This progressed until she was no longer able to continue selling cakes and all stopped for a while. Then, a couple of months ago, Elle managed to stop my boyfriend by the building entrance again, tell him a sob story and ask for some money which she would pay back. He gave in to the tune of about $20 in our local currency. I knew at the time this was a bad decision, but I bit my tongue while I waited to see how it would play out. Finally, Elle finished paying my boyfriend and I back earlier this week. However, she's since been coming around again at night to ring the doorbell. Just now, she rang 5 times without answer before finally getting the point and leaving. My boyfriend and I are sick and tired of having our peace interrupted. I'm no longer answering the door or any calls, and neither is he. The problem is that Elle is still our building president for the next year, and so we can't ghost her entirely. I want to find a way to politely tell Elle that boyfriend and I are no longer interested in a friendship outside of the passing hello. What advice do you have for handling Elle and her annoying interruptions? We feel bad for her problems, but we can't handle regular chats or supporting her with handouts anymore. Updates from OP in the comments section. One commenter, Battle of Lisa, says, your boyfriend really needs to put his foot down as hard as you're trying, having a convo, and really, really be on the same page if she asks for money or conversation or texts or rings again. I know confrontation is scary, but you need to give this woman clear boundaries. I'd also start recording in detail every single interaction, be it a conversation, a doorbell, or an ignored call, down to the time and date. I'd also suggest writing a polite letter and keep a copy for yourself. And OP replies, "Thanks, I'll try to have a deeper conversation with him about it tomorrow and keeping track of her behavior. I'll talk to him about the letter. Mostly, I just want to create a polite distance with our neighbor, but I understand that she probably thinks we're more friendly than we actually are. I also recognize that she's likely to feel hurt by us backing out of the relationship, which is why this needs to be done gently but firmly." Another commenter asked OP, "What rules are in place for being a president? How are the board members voted on, like the length of term? Make it a point to be on a call. Call a friend before entering and make it seem important. When she tries to talk, say, 'Hold on' to the call and explain you will talk later as the call is important." And OP replies, "The whole president thing is messy. She was chosen by random draw out of a hat because no one volunteered to run. The position lasts 2 years and has been going on for nearly 1. There's no set rules on what powers that she has, but basically, she's our representative when it comes to dealing with things like maintenance issues. She's also in charge of calling meetings of the neighbors to decide on building issues. I make a point never to hang around the entryway and always have an excuse ready. It makes me sad to have to buzz by because I used to be able to stop and chat with the doorman who was friendly. Elle mostly gets under my skin because of her persistence, even when to me it's clear that we're no longer interested in friendly chats or helping her out. It's one thing to knock or call once or twice and then go away, but it's another to ring 5 times and call multiple times in a day over a non-emergency." This commenter suggests that every interruption needs to be, "Sorry, I don't have time to talk right now." And OP replies, "I've been either doing this or ignoring her completely. She doesn't seem to get it and keeps pushing. I forgot to mention that she rang the doorbell about 5 times yesterday evening as well. I got fined by an HOA that I'm not even part of." Posted by PM Georgia O'Keefe. "My mother-in-law is the president of her condo owners association. Back in January, she ended up in the hospital for emergency surgery and was in the ICU for a few weeks recovering, and she's fine now. During this period, there was going to be some work done to a few of the units, and the maintenance guy needed the keys from the association. They were all in my mother-in-law's condo. It happened to be on the way home from work, so I said that I would get them the keys. While I'm there, I discover that the tumbler in her doorknob completely comes out of the knob, generally ruining the point of having a lock. I hit the hardware store down the street, get a new lock set, swap it out, and call it a day. On the next hospital visit, I give her the keys and the extra copies that I'd made. Good, great, and grand. The next week, I'm stopping by her condo to get mail and water plants. The maintenance guy sees I'm there and brings back the association keys to put back in mother-in-law's safe. He commented that he tried to do it earlier, but her key didn't work. I explained the situation. He's a nice guy, nods his head, but gave me a heads up that he had told the VP of the board about it and said that I should call him. I do. The guy explains that it is association policy that the association always has a copy of the key for the units in case of emergency and so on. I listen, I explain, and say that mother-in-law, the president, has all the copies, so technically the association does have a copy. Plus, it's an extenuating circumstance. VP is having none of it. I'm there a few days later to do mail and plants again when the maintenance guy knocks on the door. He's the messenger, but needs to issue me a fine. $75. I thought it was a joke, but he hands over a letter saying that, since I changed the lock set, I'm at fault. I took the letter, which asked for my official mailing address and social security number for their records in case of default on payment. It all ended up getting resolved, and because mother-in-law was already in a world of crap following surgery, I didn't make a stink of it. But the frickin' balls on the VP when he got a second of power. Updates and more info from OP. Tiger USF asked in the comments, I'm 99% sure they could never fine you. It'd be her, the owner. Ultra petty, though. And OP replies, oh, I'm 100% sure. I threw out the letter. Apparently, they use a PM company that handles all the fines, so not sure where this VP got the idea of doing this. Maybe because I didn't grovel at their feet? Mother-in-law was ticked when she learned of it after getting discharged. Lufa of Doom asked OP, I'd make them famous. Tell the local news station they love this type of crap from the populace. Put the VP's name out there. If he's going to be petty, make him famous and petty. And OP replies, like I said, my mother-in-law is president of the association and just got back from emergency surgery. I didn't want to screw up her world. Crimson 7 asked OP, if she really was ticked, she screwed up his world something special, as she should have. As OP replies, sadly, no. Kind old lady. And Six Bubbles says, kind does not equal doormat. Do shady thing, fire my boss, hide millions from your client? I don't think so. Posted by Texan Native 71. Forgive me if this is long, this happened a while ago, but it's still so fresh in my mind. I left college with a business degree in one hand and no job in the other. And like so many colleges, the promises of alumni willing to give jobs to graduates could not have been further from the truth. So I had to seek out my start from the bottom. I found a good job in operations at a company, I can't say who without giving it away. I had a great boss who taught me pretty much everything I needed to know. Work was great and the money was good. I need to explain how the business worked so you can understand how the plan worked. The corporate office was in California and we were not. There are a lot of things that went on at this company and I can't get into all of them because it would just take away from the story, but let's just say they had a very Stratton Oakmont vibe when it came to sales. I started out, worked in operations with some of the smaller clients, but with some help from my boss, I was able to climb the ladder rather quickly to the point of being over all the operations and order processing for the firm. We had a very large client, 90% of the company's business. The way it worked was we had two sets of sales reps, TSRs and CSRs. TSRs were the heavy hitters who reached out to the other big businesses and tech firms to extend their warranties on a product. They made real good money. The CSRs were more of the mom and pop crowd and the inbound sales calls for those that wanted to extend their warranties. The reps were all given codes that associates the client's files with theirs, so if someone did a renewal automatically, they would get paid as if it were their client. Pretty sweet gig. The client hired the firm to be the middleman for their B2B, business to business, as they handled all of their everyday clients. For every $100 that came into our firm, 18%, or $18, would be for the company and the rest would be sent to the clients with the warranties activated. Most of the clients paid by credit card or purchase order with a wire transfer, but there would also be a good amount of checks each week that would need to be processed. A little while after I started, the client check portion was now going to be overseen by one of the sales managers. Didn't really faze me because I was working on the smaller accounts. Since we were a publicly traded company, all the sales reps' orders had to go to operations to be fulfilled. They weren't allowed to process them on their own. This is when things started going downhill. My boss at the time was given temporary access to the financials as they were hiring a new CFO and he had a background with it. We went to lunch like we had done plenty of times before, but he seemed different. When I asked him if something was wrong, he told me that something looked off with our biggest client for one of the accounts. He wanted to make sure before he said anything to the higher-ups. While this was going on, I had been offered the chance to be our new compliance officer, which means I would need to make sure everything was on the up and up. Soon after, I come in to find out that my boss was just terminated for a multitude of reasons, all of which had to be untrue because he was a pretty well-liked guy with not just the company, but with our client as well. As I log into my terminal, I see that before he left, he had given me admin access to his files. Here's where things started to pop off. Remember those checks that the clients were sending in to renew their warranties? Well, we were cashing them all right. Apparently, we just weren't adding those renewals to their products in the system. That would have triggered a payout to our client who, as you remembered, would be getting 82% of that money. Instead, they were cashing the checks, keeping the money, and using the interest in the accounts, yes, in the mid-2000s banks actually paid interest, to cover losses in their collections department. It was wild to see that this was happening, and something had to be done. So I hatched a plan. First things first, secure a new job because it won't be a fun place to work after this. Done. My previous boss knew of other companies that would scoop me up, put in my notice, and stated in my exit interview that I just couldn't be a part of what was happening, even though HR was in on this. I wanted it on the record. Next, get approval for overtime for all the operations crew to come in on a Saturday and double pay them. They arrive early Saturday, obviously not too thrilled as to why they are there. But when I explain that if they complete the task, not only do they get their overtime, but they get nice bonuses, they were much happier. They spent the entire day applying all of those checks dated back years to the client accounts. We're talking millions of dollars. When all the sales reps arrived Monday, they were shocked as heck. Not only did they meet their weekly goals before picking up the phones, they made their monthly and quarterly goals too. 2 weeks into the new quarter. Cheers, partying, yelling, screaming, celebrating. Except sales management. They went from being really excited to skeptical, to confused, to oh crap in about 2 hours. They realized where it must have come from. Because not only did the company hit all these sales, since it had been paid over a day, the client came into work Monday to see a very nice payday in their system as well. And, like anyone, would have questions, and says they are coming out to congratulate the team on such great numbers. So management starts scrambling because they can't figure out how this happened, and all under my boss's old login? On my last day, I arrive, and in the lobby, I've got my box for the last of my things and so on. Guy walks up as he's waiting for the elevator with me, and we strike up conversation. He notices my box and jokes about getting fired, and I just tell him I had a great opportunity come up, so I decided to leave before crap hits the fan. We laughed. Really nice down-to-earth guy. He realizes we are getting off on the same floor. He asks if I work for X, and I say yes. He asks where, and I tell him operations, and he reveals that he is the CEO of our client. Ooh, we go our separate ways. Client shows up and there's a big party. Afterwards, the client says that they would love to get a breakdown of where most of the sales came from so they can allocate more money to that department. Management says, sure, but it made up a lie about how they can't share client payment info due to regulations, blah, 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 blah. Cue my exit from the company. 2 weeks go by and I get a phone call from a number I don't recognize, so I let it go to voicemail. When I get off work, I checked it to find out it was the CEO of the client where I used to work. He, quote, has had something come up, end quote, and would like to talk to me. Of course, I'm nervous as heck, but I call him back and he picks up the phone on the first ring, and we get to chatting for a bit, and he finally just asked me, why did you leave? I tell him I had a great opportunity come up. He doesn't buy it, and he says that apparently my comment about crap hitting the fan really stuck with him, and he thinks something more is going on. So, after a little more prodding from him, I just tell him, just look at collections, and that's all I can say. He thanks me, and I hang up. 2 days later, he pulled the plug on the account. Apparently, my old company tried to threaten him with a lawsuit for pulling the account 3 years early. He replied with, that's fine, because I'll show the courts that I have evidence that you committed fraud. Corporate came in and cleaned house. All of management was fired within the day. 1 month later, my friends and I had a very memorable trip in Vegas, all courtesy of our old client. The epilogue. The best part. I guess this should have been part of the story. My old boss was an adopted kid and treated his adopted parents great, while their real kids didn't. And when they passed, they left him all their money. All of it. This was about 2008. He was in a weird place because he loved his parents and was really close to them. He went to church to pray for his parents and for what to do with this new landfall of money. He loved working, but didn't need to anymore. He left the church and went to a bar, because I mean, who doesn't? And he sits next to a guy who, and this is almost out of a movie, is a developer and has run out of money to finish his development because it's 2008, and no one is loaning money. They get to talking and he thinks, maybe this is a sign. I'll speed this up because I've got to run to work, but he invests in the guy's development by buying all the houses, dirt cheap at the time, and now lives off the residual income from all of them being rentals. Life sucks because so many people do crappy things and get away with it. That it's great when good things happen to good people.
HOA finds me illegally and breaks the law. I fight back. Here's how. Click the video on your screen. You don't want to miss the crazy story here, and I'll see you there.